As a leader in the church, I had to figure out what my role was in leading God's people. And there's always been a lot of super talented people around me, people who had a higher capacity and way more talent than I did. But being a leader, we have to learn how to lead all of the people around us. And so I want to share a couple of things today. First of all, I had to figure out what is my role as a leader? What is sort of my baseline, most practical thing that I can do as a leader? How do I boil it down? I'm a simple girl. I don't do a lot of complicated stuff. And so I just needed a baseline for leadership in my life. And this is the sort of thing that I came to figure out will work in my home as discipleship, in the church as discipleship, in the workplace, and in the church. If I approach leadership with this baseline, my highest priority as a leader is to recognize and release what God is doing in someone else's life. So let me explain this a sec. As a parent, as a leader in the church, I'm always looking for the activity of God in someone's life. I'm looking, what is God doing? What does He see in this person's life? What is the potential this person has to serve in His kingdom? And how do I develop and release what God is doing? And so I want to just walk through a few things here. First of all, this kind of leadership is highly relational. It's not transactional. If you're just looking for someone to do a job for you, that's one thing. But I'm actually highly motivated by seeing people grow spiritually and personally, because I believe when they grow personally, I'm going to get more out of them in their job and in their role. And so one of the greatest things that we can do, and I think of this a lot as a parent. So my first place of discipleship was in my home, parenting my kids, but it spills over into the church and into church leadership. And so my highest priority was to provide a safe place for my kids to grow and thrive. And I feel like in the church, it's the same thing. In leadership, it's the same thing. It's my responsibility as a leader to provide a safe environment for people to thrive in. And when I am highly relational, when I'm looking to see their own personal and spiritual growth, it provides them that place where they can actually spread their wings and begin to grow. So the first part of this, if I'm going to recognize and release what's in their life, first I have to recognize it. So what is God doing in this person's life? And I'm going to give you a few points in this, in recognizing what God is doing, because I honestly believe that if I invest intentionally in this person, they're going to invest more in my church, my company, in their volunteer role, whatever it is that they're doing. So I do more listening. That's the first point. I need to be a really good listener, because the more I listen, the more I'll pick up on the things that God's doing in this person's life. What is happening? What's the shifts in movement? Is there a place where this person is stuck or feeling a brokenness? Where is God breaking through in this person's life? And I need to listen well in order to build the relational equity that's required to lead people well. I believe that all good relationships, including the ones in the workplace and in the church, are built on strong relationships. And so sometimes we got to get down past people's layers of defense and pretenses that they put up and actually build that deeper relationship. The second thing that I do, the second point, is that I speak to their potential. So I want to be able to see what God sees in them. I want to be able to speak to that and begin to call it forth out of them. I want to be able to say, look, I see that right now you're a youth pastor, but I see the potential in you that you could be a lead pastor. How do we develop you and get you into that place? I want to help people get a dream for their life and actually speak into that and call it out of them. And then I encourage what I see. So when I do see growth, when I do see people making changes and growing in their life, I'm actually going to point that out and say, hey, I noticed that you've been doing this. Hey, I noticed this has changed or shifted in your life. I want people to actually feel like someone is paying attention and someone is noticing when they're actually putting these things in place in their life. And then I like to remind people how far they've come. if they've been working with me for a while, I like to look back and go, remember when? Remember when this was, broken, or this wasn't working right and this got fixed, and like, look how far you've come. Let's celebrate the progress. I love to be able to celebrate on the journey. Often we're looking at the destination and where we want to be, and we don't take the time to celebrate in the present moment what God is doing. And then we need to release what God is doing. So once we've recognized it, we need to begin to help release it and develop this person. And this is really important, because if we miss this, then we'll lose the people. And this is especially true with millennials. They're so unlikely to stay in one job for a long time, but I believe that anyone, millennials and anyone else, if they're being developed, if someone actually cares about them and wants to see them grow and develop, it's going to keep them in a role for a lot longer. If I'm noticing their potential and I'm noticing their growth and I'm helping them track towards a vision and a dream for their life, it's going to help to retain them a lot longer and keep them much more interested in the job or the role that they have. So how do we begin to release what God is doing in someone's life? So the first thing here is that we need to set safe boundaries. I believe that people appreciate clearly communicated boundaries. No one wants to overstep or step outside of their job or their role. People in general want to please their boss, they want to please their leaders and stay within the parameters that are set. But as leaders, if we fail to clearly set those boundaries and parameters for people, then they're constantly going to be wondering, can I step here? Can I do this? Is this appropriate? And that will hinder them from actually stepping out and doing it. So I love to be able to encourage, especially young leaders, and say, hey, if you ever feel like, I want you to know you have the green light to go ahead and do that, so that they know that they have a space to grow in. The second thing is that we have to give them time and space for personal and spiritual growth. So most people, and especially if you have young leaders and they have young families and kids, there is very little margin in their personal lives for growth, for actually being intentional about growing in their craft, in their talent and abilities, and just in their spiritual life. And so I've wondered, like, what if we gave them an hour a week out of their paid work schedule to actually just invest in themselves? What if that meant for them watching a great sermon, or just prayer and personal devotion? What would it mean for that person to dream again and begin to expound the boundaries of what they do in the present moment? We need to let people dream. I remember Lisa Turkis did this a long time ago with her staff and saw great results. I read about it in one of her books. And one person who was in a role as an administrator actually launched a whole new ministry because she was allowed a certain amount of space in her week to dream. And so we need to allow that for our people. And the third thing about releasing people's potential is to give them ample opportunities to try new things. So I don't want to see anyone ever locked into a job or a role where they don't have the opportunity to step out and try new things. And a lot of times with the people I lead, I'll if I feel like they're getting stagnant in an area, I'll actually push them a little bit and say, like, have you thought about trying this? Have you thought about stepping out and kind of, move your boundaries out a little bit in this area, and give them the space to try. And you know what? The truth is, sometimes we fail. Sometimes we fall flat on our face, but if we don't risk and we don't try anything, we're going to lose out on a lot of creative ideas and great things that have the potential to grow out of those opportunities. So I certainly never want to be the cap for my organization. I don't want to cap my church growth or my volunteer team's growth because I can't see the potential that God is building in the people in my teams. And so I always want to be able to recognize, develop, and release what God is doing in someone's life. This isn't neat and clean. It's not easy. It can be complicated. There's opportunity for failure along the way. But if you're a good coach and a good leader who can actually speak into that person's life, you could see tremendous growth by using these principles we've talked about here today.